The night was draped in a thick, suffocating darkness as I navigated the desolate stretch of highway. The dim glow of the dashboard lights cast an eerie ambience inside the car, emphasizing the isolation that surrounded me. It was past midnight, and I found myself in the heart of nowhere, with only the monotonous hum of the engine for company. A dense fog clung to the edges of the road, reducing visibility to a mere few feet. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles turning white as I strained to peer through the murky veil ahead. The road signs, barely visible, hinted at distant towns I had never heard of, adding to the unsettling atmosphere that seemed to seep into the very fabric of the night. A sudden thud beneath the car jolted me from my uneasy thoughts. I glanced in the rearview mirror, heart pounding, but there was nothing to be seen. The fog had swallowed the road behind me, erasing any trace of what might have caused the sound. I shook off the unease, chalking it up to the quirks of an old car or perhaps a piece of debris on the road. As I pressed on, a feeling of isolation settled in, the sensation that I was the only living soul for miles around. The radio offered no solace, the signal crackled with intermittent static, rendering it unlistenable. I fumbled with the dial, hoping to catch a station, but the only sounds that emerged were disjointed voices and eerie whispers that sent a shiver down my spine. A dim glow on the roadside caught my attention. A flickering neon sign announced the presence of a lonely gas station, its windows reflecting the feeble light in a way that made the place look more like a haunted relic than a pit stop. Despite the reluctance clawing at my gut, the fuel gauge insisted on my need to refuel. I pulled into the station, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. The flickering fluorescent lights hummed above as I stepped out into the chilly night. The gas station attendant, an elderly man with sunken eyes and a weary expression, emerged from the shadows. His greeting was a low mumble, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more about the desolation surrounding us than he let on. "Long night ahead," he mumbled, the words barely audible over the distant howl of the wind. I nodded, suppressing the unease that threatened to surface. The gas pump groaned as I filled the tank, the rhythmic sound echoing in the emptiness around us. As I glanced around, I noticed an old, tattered map of the area pinned to a bulletin board. Curiosity getting the better of me, I approached it, studying the faded roads and forgotten towns. The old man's voice interrupted my thoughts. "You best be careful out there. These roads ain't what they seem, especially at night." I forced a polite smile, dismissing his words as the ramblings of a small-town eccentric. But as I got back into my car and pulled away from the gas station, the fog seemed thicker, the shadows more menacing. The map's roads twisted in my mind, the towns on it whispering tales of forgotten tragedies. As I drove on, the fog became a living entity, swirling around the car in ghostly tendrils. The road stretched endlessly ahead, the headlights piercing the darkness with a feeble glow. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the side of the road, obscured by the fog. Instinct screamed at me to drive past, but something about the silhouette stirred a strange compassion. I slowed down, the figure becoming clearer. A woman, dressed in a tattered white gown, her hair a tangled mess. Her vacant eyes met mine as she extended a trembling hand. Without thinking, I rolled down the window, the chill of the night air seeping into the car. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on something beyond the darkness. A sense of dread crept over me, a feeling that I had stumbled upon something otherworldly. As I tried to make sense of the situation, her words, soft as a distant whisper, reached my ears. "Beware the road less traveled, for it leads to places where the lost linger." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Before I could react, she vanished into the fog, leaving me alone on the desolate highway. The air felt heavier, and the fog pressed in, suffocating me with a foreboding presence. Shaken, I accelerated, the highway stretching ahead like an unending nightmare. The fog clung to the car, and the whispering voices from the radio returned, echoing haunting secrets of forgotten towns and lost souls. The road ahead seemed to twist and turn, leading me into the heart of the unknown. As the night wore on, the highway became a labyrinth of shadows, each turn more disorienting than the last. The air inside the car grew colder, and an oppressive silence settled in. I couldn't shake the feeling that the road itself was alive, guiding me to a destination unknown. In the distance, a faint light flickered. A town, forgotten by time, emerged from the darkness. The dilapidated buildings and empty streets whispered tales of a tragic past. I drove through the ghost town, the only sound the eerie creaking of swinging signs in the cold wind. As the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon, I emerged from the surreal nightmare that had unfolded on that desolate highway. The fog lifted, and the isolation that had gripped me loosened its hold. The gas station, the mysterious woman, the haunting whispers, it all felt like fragments of a macabre dream. But as I continued my journey, the memory of that night lingered like a ghostly echo. The desolate highway had shown me a glimpse of a world where reality and the supernatural intertwined, leaving me with a chilling awareness that some roads are better left untraveled, for they lead to the darkest corners of the unknown. The hum of the engine and the monotonous rhythm of the tires on the asphalt were the only sounds that accompanied me on that desolate stretch of highway. The moon hung low in the night sky, casting an eerie glow on the deserted road ahead. I glanced at the clock, 2:33 a.m. The late-night drive was a necessity. I had to reach my destination before dawn. Little did I know that this journey would take a turn into the realms of horror that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. As I pressed on the gas pedal, the radio signal weakened, succumbing to the isolation that enveloped the highway. The only stations left were a mix of static and faint voices, adding to the growing sense of unease. I dismissed it as a consequence of being in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by vast fields and towering trees that seemed to lean in, creating a claustrophobic tunnel of darkness. Suddenly, my headlights caught something on the side of the road. A hitchhiker stood there, their silhouette barely visible. My initial instinct was to keep driving, but a pang of guilt twisted in my gut. What if they were stranded, desperate for a ride? I slowed down and pulled over, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. The stranger approached, face obscured by the shadow of a tattered hood. A shiver ran down my spine as they opened the door and slid into the passenger seat without a word. The scent of damp earth and something metallic filled the car, a scent that seemed to cling to the stranger's clothes. Unease gnawed at me, but I forced a polite smile. "Thanks for stopping," the hitchhiker muttered, their voice a low, raspy whisper. I nodded, my fingers gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. The silence settled between us like a thick fog. I tried to make small talk, asking where they were headed, but the hitchhiker's responses were vague and cryptic. They seemed more interested in staring out of the window into the abyss of the night. As we drove, the surroundings became increasingly eerie, the trees leaning in more ominously, and the fields appearing like endless voids. I decided to break the silence by turning on the radio, hoping for some distraction. The static-filled airwaves played a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. The hitchhiker's eyes widened, and a twisted smile played on their lips. I quickly turned off the radio, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sorry, not a fan of music," they said, their tone colder than before. I swallowed hard, the tension inside the car escalating. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this stranger, something beyond the eerie atmosphere of the highway. As we continued, the hitchhiker's directions became increasingly erratic, guiding me through dimly lit backroads that seemed to defy logic. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to ask them to leave. The air inside the car grew thicker, the metallic scent intensifying. Suddenly, the headlights illuminated a dilapidated motel on the side of the road. The hitchhiker insisted that this was their destination. Relieved, I pulled into the empty parking lot. As they stepped out, they turned to face me, their hood still concealing their features. "Thank you for the ride," they said, their voice taking on a chilling edge. "But remember, sometimes the road leads to places you can never escape." With those cryptic words, they disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone in the eerie glow of the motel's flickering neon sign. A cold sweat coated my skin as I watched them vanish, and a sense of impending doom settled over me. I drove away from the motel, desperate to leave that forsaken place behind. The highway stretched endlessly before me, the isolation and darkness closing in like malevolent entities. The metallic scent lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of the stranger who had left an indelible mark on my journey. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed paths with something otherworldly on that desolate highway, something that whispered of the unknown and left a chilling imprint on my soul. The night was thick with a darkness that seemed to swallow the headlights as I sped down the desolate highway. The rhythmic hum of the engine and the monotonous thud of tires against asphalt were my only companions. The radio had long since lost its battle with static, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the eerie silence of the road. I glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. The digital numbers glowed like ominous eyes in the darkness of the car's interior. I had been driving for hours, pushing through fatigue and the nagging feeling that something was not quite right. The road stretched endlessly ahead, framed by dense woods that whispered secrets with the rustling of unseen creatures. The gas gauge needle flirted dangerously close to empty, and the next sign for a gas station was nowhere in sight. Anxiety gnawed at me as I considered the desolate stretch of highway I found myself on. I hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether to push on or risk running out of gas in this ominous wilderness. As if in response to my internal debate, the headlights flickered momentarily, plunging the car into darkness. My heart skipped a beat, and I clenched the steering wheel. The lights regained their glow, and a sigh of relief escaped my lips. I shook off the unease, attributing it to the wear and tear of the aging vehicle. The highway seemed to coil and wind like a serpent through the dense forest. Shadows played tricks on my eyes, and the shapes of gnarled branches resembled twisted figures that lurked just beyond the edge of the road. A chill settled over me, and I rubbed my arms, attempting to dispel the growing sense of unease. Then, I saw her, a figure standing at the side of the road. My headlights illuminated a young woman, her clothing disheveled and torn. Strands of unkempt hair clung to her pale face. The hitchhiker's thumb extended in a plea for help. Instinct screamed at me to keep driving, to ignore the desperate figure in the night, but a flicker of compassion compelled me to slow down. Rolling down the window, I asked if she needed assistance. Her eyes, wide and filled with a mix of fear and relief, met mine. She spoke in a hushed voice, explaining that her car had broken down, and she had been stranded for hours. The nearest town was miles away, and she had no means of communication. Against the backdrop of the lonely highway, her plea seemed genuine. I unlocked the passenger door, allowing her to step into the car. She introduced herself as Emily, expressing gratitude for the timely rescue. As the car resumed its journey, Emily's presence brought an odd sense of comfort that momentarily eased the tension. She spoke of a nearby town where her sister lived, painting vivid pictures of warmth and familiarity that contrasted sharply with the cold, desolate night outside. However, as the conversation unfolded, subtle details emerged that left me uneasy. Emily avoided eye contact, and her responses to my questions grew increasingly vague. I decided to test her by mentioning a fictional town nearby, watching for any signs of inconsistency. Emily's reaction was subtle, but a flicker of confusion betrayed her. Alarm bells rang in my mind, and I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The atmosphere inside the car shifted, the air thick with an unspoken tension. The road ahead seemed to stretch on endlessly, the darkness outside the reach of my headlights playing tricks on my perception. Emily's silhouette, cast by the dim glow of the dashboard, appeared distorted, her features obscured by shadows that danced with every turn of the road. I mustered the courage to confront her, asking about the inconsistency in her story. The air grew heavier as Emily's demeanor shifted. The once thankful and desperate hitchhiker transformed into a silent, ominous presence. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now bore into mine with an unsettling intensity. A chill ran down my spine as Emily spoke in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of the night itself. "You shouldn't have stopped for me," she whispered, the words hanging in the air like a curse. Panic set in, and I contemplated pulling over to confront her or continue driving in search of help. Before I could decide, the car's headlights flickered again, this time for a prolonged moment. In the darkness, I caught a glimpse of Emily's face contorting into an expression that sent shivers down my spine, a grotesque, twisted smile that seemed to belong to something otherworldly. The headlights regained their strength, and I found myself alone in the car. Emily had vanished without a trace. A scream caught in my throat as I scanned the surroundings, the forest outside the window seemingly devoid of life. The air inside the car felt charged with an otherworldly energy, and a sense of dread settled over me. I pressed on, the highway now a maze of uncertainty. The gas gauge dipped dangerously lower, and the car seemed to protest each mile further into the heart of the night. The dense woods pressed in on either side of the road, their secrets hidden in the shadows. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, I emerged from the treacherous stretch of highway. The gas station I had desperately sought stood in the distance like a beacon of salvation. I pulled in, my hands trembling as I filled the tank. The eerie silence that had enveloped the car dissipated with the soft hum of the gas pump. The memory of that fateful night haunted me, lingering like a ghostly echo. The highway had revealed a darkness that transcended the physical realm, and the encounter with Emily left an indelible mark on my soul. As I drove away from the gas station, the rising sun painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, but the shadows of that haunted highway lingered, a reminder that some roads are best left untraveled, for they lead to the unknown depths of the supernatural.